success often comes at a price. No one knows this better than the man who transformed the UFC into a multi-billion-dollar empire. The transformation of the UFC from an obscure organization into a global mixed martial arts empire is a captivating story of ambition, risk, and unwavering determination. At the center of this transformation stands the figure of Dana White, whose journey from a hotel bellman to a media mogul became the embodiment of the American dream. In the early 2000s, the UFC was teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. The sport of mixed martial arts elicited controversial reactions in society, with many states banning tournaments and television networks refusing to broadcast them. It was at this critical moment that Dana White, along with the Fertitta brothers, saw potential in the declining brand. Under White's leadership, the UFC turned into a true sports extravaganza. Each tournament became not just a competition, but a captivating show with well-thought-out dramaturgy, vibrant personalities, and an incredible atmosphere. The promotion began attracting the best fighters from around the world, creating legendary rivalries that gathered millions of viewers. But success did not come easily. White had to fight numerous challenges, from financial difficulties to skepticism from the sports community. His tough leadership style and uncompromising approach to negotiations often drew criticism, but it was this steadfastness that helped the UFC reach new heights. Today, the UFC is not just a sports organization, but a global media phenomenon with an estimated worth of over $10 billion. The promotion has contracts with the largest television networks, holds tournaments worldwide, and creates new sports stars. UFC fighters have become true celebrities, and their purses reach astronomical sums. But how did a simple hotel employee manage to conquer the world of martial arts? And what lies behind such success? Dana was born in Manchester, Connecticut, but grew up constantly moving around the country. His alcoholic father left the family, so the boy was raised by his mother, who worked excessively and could not give her son enough attention. My sister and I were always left alone. When you grow up in such conditions, you learn a lot on your own. And honestly, I wouldn't change anything about my childhood. If it weren't for those circumstances, I would have never become who I am now. I'm 100% convinced of that. At school, Dana was a problematic student who wasn't too concerned about his studies. Instead, he constantly misbehaved and got into trouble. A particularly amusing incident happened at a Catholic school in Las Vegas. White's antics drove the nun teacher to madness. The school had huge metal doors that were always left open due to the heat. Once I went to the bathroom and slammed the door with all my might. It made the nun so angry that she couldn't finish the lesson. From then on, I slammed the doors every day until I was finally expelled from school. His hot temper led Dana into boxing. At 17, he began regularly visiting the gym, and within a year, he was actively participating in amateur tournaments. White dreamed of a professional career, but later abandoned that idea. Once a local boxer came to our gym. He wasn't even 30 yet, but he was already completely drunk. He could barely move, all battered. I thought then, damn it, what if that happens to me? And I realized, no, boxing is not for me. After school, Dana went to Boston. He enrolled in a local university, but quickly realized that higher education was not for him either. Leaving his studies in the first semester, White settled in South Boston, a poor neighborhood of Irish immigrant descendants. In the late 80s, this place was a true den of criminal gangs, whose tyranny Dana had to face personally. Once I walked into a bar and got into a fight, they ganged up on me and started beating me. They beat the crap out of me for about 20 minutes until the police arrived. I remember standing on one knee, and some scumbag was hitting me in the ear probably 1,000 times. Because of that incident, I partially lost my hearing and then fought Meniere's disease for another 20 years. In South Boston, Dana took on any job. He drove cars, laid asphalt, threw drunks out of pubs. After changing many occupations, White got a job as a bellman at the posh Boston Harbor Hotel. Every day, he opened doors and carried suitcases, earning $100,000 a year. Many of his peers could only dream of such a job, but White wanted more. The bellman job brought in decent money, but I wasn't happy. Once I stopped in the middle of the hotel lobby and suddenly realized, what the hell am I doing here? This is not my thing at all, he said, and at that very moment, I decided to quit. A friend asked Dana what he was going to do, to which he heard an unexpected answer. I'm going into the fighting business. His buddy laughed, calling the idea crazy, and they parted ways. But White knew where his true calling was. Returning to Vegas, Dana White began his career as a boxing coach and fighter manager. Thanks to his natural charisma and persuasive skills, he quickly earned a reputation in the local fighting scene. But success attracted not only fans, but also dangerous enemies. Once after training, two burly guys approached Dana and, without further ado, stated, "Kevin Wiggs wants to talk to you." That name made the blood run cold. Everyone in South Boston knew that Kevin Wiggs was an Irish mafia enforcer who worked for the legendary gangster Whitey Bulger. At first, they wanted $5,000 as tribute. That was crazy money for me. White recalled, when I refused, the stakes rose to $2,500 a week. I refused again, so Wiggs promised that I would understand. That same day, I packed my bags and fled to Vegas to save my skin. In Sin City, Dana tracked down an old school friend, Lorenzo Fertitta. Lorenzo and his brother inherited a huge empire of casinos and hotels. So the failed bellman and the millionaire magnate seemed to be from different worlds. But despite the differences in wealth and education, they were united by a strong friendship and a shared passion, a love for martial arts. Sons of a legendary casino owner, the Fertitta brothers grew up in affluence, received a brilliant education at the best universities in the country, and under their father's wise guidance, turned into extremely successful businessmen. But despite their respectable status, Lorenzo and Frank remained sincere buddies who, in their hearts, forever remained simple guys. We loved boxing and went to all the big fights. Lorenzo shared his memories. And then we got into jiu-jitsu and started training. It was through the gym that we met wonderful fighters who introduced us to the world of mixed martial arts. The Fertittas were thrilled with the UFC, a young organization that sought to identify the most effective fighting style. Since 1993, the promotion had held a series of high-profile tournaments that gathered dedicated fans around the octagon. The brothers did not miss a single show and even flew to other cities for landmark events. I remember how we sat in the hall during the UFC and whispered to each other, "Dude, imagine if they did this and that. This thing can really take off and bring in crazy money." Frank laughed. They did not yet know that very soon fate would give them a chance not only to dream, but also to bring their ideas to reality. And it would be none other than Dana White who would help them with this. A new stage in the history of the UFC began with an unexpected decline. The tournaments of the organization, which surprised the world with spectacular no-holds-barred fights, began to lose viewers. But at UFC 27, two ardent fans were still sitting in the stands, believing in the stunning future of mixed martial arts. Lorenzo and Frank Fertitta came not just to watch the fights, but to evaluate the prospects of acquiring the company. Meanwhile, Dana White, who became a sports manager for promising fighters Chuck Liddell and Tito Ortiz, began negotiations for new contracts with UFC owner Bob Marowitz. But the negotiations turned into a scandal. It turned out that Marowitz had cheated Ortiz and had not paid him the proper fee for a winning fight. I said that it wasn't right, that Tito should get his money. White was indignant. In response, Marowitz began yelling, saying there was no money, the company was barely making ends meet, and we were still demanding something. Then I understood everything. The UFC was in a desperate situation, barely leaving the office of the infuriated Marowitz. Dana immediately called the Fertitta brothers. "It looks like the UFC is on the verge of bankruptcy," he blurted out without further ado. "I think we have an opportunity to buy the promotion." Lorenzo and Frank, who had long been harboring similar plans, instantly agreed. The unexpected call put Marowitz in a dead end. He realized that he had lost the trust of the leading fighters in the audience, and now he was also on the verge of financial collapse. But pride would not allow him to sell cheaply. "I will sell the UFC for $2 million and not a cent less," he said through gritted teeth. The Fertittas did not even bargain. A month later, the fateful deal took place. The brothers founded Zuffa LLC, Italian for Fight, and officially became the new owners of the UFC. They entrusted Dana White with the position of president and 10% of the company's shares. But the joy of realizing the dream quickly changed to a bitter realization of the scale of the problems. At the time of the purchase of the UFC for $2 million, the new owners received only contracts with 30 fighters, an old wooden octagon, and the rights to the promotion's name. The previous owner, Bob Marowitz, sold off everything of value: the archive of records, video game licenses, merch. Even the website domain was tied to third-party servers. Dana White had to build the business from scratch, promoting a sport that was banned on pay-per-view TV and in dozens of states. Dana is trying to promote a sport that is banned on TV in most states and on the international stage. The UFC was banned from pay-per-view while even porn gets paid for. UFC stars like Ken Shamrock and Mark Coleman are going into either wrestling or Japan, where the UFC's biggest competitor, Pride, was. Pride was filling stadiums in Japan, where mixed martial arts were more favorably received. They had the best fighters in the world, including Americans. To develop the business, Dana went to a bookstore and bought books on finance and promotion. He understood that his task was to convince people to stay at home on a Saturday after a hard week at school or work and pay $55 to watch a tournament instead of going to a bar, meeting girls, or taking their girlfriend out to dinner and a movie. The priority was to whitewash and legitimize the brand so that it would be perceived as a real sport. The UFC begins by adopting official rules that give the sport legitimacy. Lawrence Epstein, the UFC's chief operating officer, is responsible for the day-to-day operations of the company and travels to states and countries to get MMA approved. Joe Silva and Sean Shelby become the official UFC matchmakers, also working on scouting talent. To improve the quality of event production, the UFC produces its own television production, hiring experienced ESPN producer Bruce Connell as the lead producer and host of the show Fear Factor. The huge costs spent on all these efforts are starting to worry the Fertitta parents. The company is burning through about $44 million, but things are not taking off. The idea for the reality show, The Ultimate Fighter, was born in collaboration between Dana White and experienced producer Craig Piligian. The concept was simple. Fighters live together under one roof and compete for a UFC contract. When we bought the company, I couldn't even imagine that I would have to shoot a reality show. It took a lot of courage to agree to this. The Fertittas continued to suffer losses, and I came to them and frankly said, "Let's try to do the impossible." White recalls. The Ultimate Fighter became the organization's last hope. Everyone understood. If the show fails, it's the end. Dana approached many TV channels, but no one wanted to take the risk. Finally, White came to Spike TV with a desperate proposal. The Fertittas would personally finance the project. The TV channel only needed to provide airtime. The channel's management, which had repeatedly refused the UFC before, agreed this time. For them, it was a win-win situation. We paid for everything ourselves. They still doubted the quality of our product, but already the first episode gathered millions of viewers by the screens. These were impressive numbers, and with each new episode, the ratings only grew. The success of the show exceeded all expectations, but the real triumph was the final tournament. In the fight for a UFC contract, Forrest Griffin and Stephen Bonner put on an incredible show that ended with a standing ovation from the entire arena. This is the most important fight in the history of the company. It was watched live by 12 million viewers. These guys saved the UFC and the entire MMA industry. Without these two simple fighters, far from the most technical, there might have been nothing. Forrest Griffin and Stephen Bonner forever changed the sport. A week after the finale of The Ultimate Fighter, UFC 52 took place. The fight between the show's coaches, Chuck Liddell and Randy Couture, sold 300,000 pay-per-views, doubling the promotion's previous record. Riding the wave of success, the UFC signed a multi-million-dollar contract with Spike TV, and the reality show was renewed for another season. The organization emerged from a crisis. During these 5 years, we went through many trials. People doubted us, but we continued to believe in our cause. Hundreds of authoritative businessmen and journalists said that we would not succeed, but time and perseverance put everything in its place. We turned out to be right, and they were wrong. Such is the reality. You have to take risks and believe, otherwise you will not achieve anything. From 2005, the UFC began to develop rapidly, but in parallel, other companies gained momentum. The main competitors were considered to be Pride, WEC, and Strikeforce, but White and the Fertittas were not going to share the market. Over the course of 5 years, they bought out all 3 leagues, spending over $100 million. The UFC roster was replenished with dozens of talented prospects and world stars. The organization effectively monopolized the MMA market. We were not afraid of competition, but made these acquisitions due to the need for global expansion. Every year we continued to grow, entered new markets, and appeared in new countries. In such a situation, you have to be sure that you have enough tournaments and fighters to interest fans in all corners of the world. In the late 2000s, the UFC was experiencing an unprecedented rise. Arenas were packed to capacity, sponsorship contracts multiplied, and pay-per-view numbers steadily increased. The culmination of success was the anniversary tournament UFC 100, headlined by the title rematch between sworn rivals Brock Lesnar and Frank Mir. The fight sold 1.6 million pay-per-views, and in one night brought the promotion over $80 million. UFC 100 showed that MMA had become a popular and in-demand sport that would soon be able to stand alongside such giants as the NFL, NBA, and MLB. When we were just starting out, I couldn't even imagine that there would come a day when we would be able to sell at least 1 million PPVs. That evening we broke another record, but it was only the beginning. On the wave of mass popularization of MMA, in 2011 the UFC signed a contract with the Fox television network. The term of the deal was 7 years, and the total amount exceeded $700 million. From now on, tournaments were broadcast in 130 countries and 20 languages of the world. This was a historic deal for the entire fighting industry, which for the first time allowed mixed martial arts to enter millions of televisions around the planet. Over the next 5 years, the UFC made a colossal breakthrough. The promotion opened up many new stars who helped take the industry to a qualitatively new level. 8 numbered tournaments surpassed the 1 million PPV sales mark, and the company's partners became exclusively global brands. In 2015, the organization's roster included over 600 fighters representing more than 60 countries. Just imagine, in these 15 years, martial arts have progressed more than in the previous 10,000 years. This is all thanks to the UFC. Now we held tournaments in a wide variety of parts of the world, and our events were watched by tens of millions of fans. We turned MMA into a sport that the whole world loves and watches. Everything was going its way, but in early 2016, rumors suddenly appeared about a possible sale of the UFC. At first, Dana denied these reports, but already in November it became known that the media holding company of Hollywood agent Emmanuel WMG, had acquired the promotion for $4 billion. As a result of the deal, the Fertitta brothers sold all their shares and exited the business. White retained a 9% stake and remained the company's president. As soon as we completed the deal, I went into a daze. I locked myself in a hotel room where I could neither eat nor sleep for almost 3 days. When you receive such money and say goodbye to partners with whom you have worked for 15 years, it is difficult to adapt to the new reality. I could have left, but I never did it for the money. I truly love this sport, so I stayed in the business. With the arrival of new owners, the future of the UFC was called into question, but the very next year showed that the state of the company had only improved. The promotion was able to organize a series of high-profile tournaments, and in 2018, the biggest fight in MMA history took place. The scandalous confrontation between Khabib Nurmagomedov and Conor McGregor gathered 2.4 million PPVs and set a new promotion record. Riding the wave of such success, the UFC signed a deal with the largest U.S. sports broadcaster ESPN for 5 years. The contract amount was $1.5 billion. In the first year of cooperation with ESPN, the UFC demonstrated the best ratings in history, but then the pandemic began. Production falls by 80%, but the UFC does not lay off people. In the first 4 months of the year, the UFC holds only 8 tournaments out of 42. Dana White decides to rent an island in Abu Dhabi to hold events. This allows keeping the sport on the air when everything else is closed. And as a result, the UFC's fan base grows by 46%. The UFC enters the top 4 largest sports in the USA. The UFC's success is largely due to Dana White's personality. He does not embellish things, but speaks as it is, and people like it. Dana constantly tells young people and his children that even a small display of savagery will allow them to outrun many. He himself grew up without a father, and his mother often told him that he would not achieve anything in life. But Dana loves chaos and created it himself if there was none. The success story and personality of Dana still hide a lot behind the scenes. New Year's Eve 2023. Mexican nightclub. What happened next shocked the whole world. On New Year's Eve in a Mexican nightclub, White quarreled with his wife Anna. The video of the conflict hit the net and caused outrage because it shows Anna slapping her husband, and he hit her several times in response. This is especially unacceptable, given that White himself had previously publicly condemned violence against women. In a comment to TMZ, White apologized for the incident, explaining that he and his wife have been together for almost 30 years and have gone through many trials. He admitted that his actions are unacceptable and said that now he and Anna are focused on their family and children. But the most shocking revelations came from an unexpected source, from Dana's own mother. "My son has turned into a vindictive tyrant. Power and money have changed him. From a boy from a dysfunctional family to an influential businessman who has lost touch with reality." Despite a public apology, this incident forever changed the public's perception of Dana White. The man who built an empire on selling fights himself became the main character of the most shameful fight in his life. This unfortunate case casts a shadow on the reputation of Dana White and the UFC, which positions itself as a respectable sports organization. It once again proves that behind the scenes of loud success, personal problems and shortcomings of even the most influential people are often hidden. Dana White's story is a classic example of American success, but with a deep cautionary subtext. It shows how ambition, perseverance, and courage can turn a simple guy from a disadvantaged family into one of the most influential figures in the world of sports. At the same time, it is a story about how success and power can change a person, not always for the better. Starting his journey as an ordinary hotel bellman, White was able to see the potential in the declining UFC business. His partnership with the Fertitta brothers became a turning point not only for the company, but for the entire mixed martial arts industry. They bought the UFC for $2 million when the organization was on the verge of bankruptcy and turned it into a multi-billion-dollar empire. The key factor of success was Dana's ability to make bold decisions at critical moments. The creation of the reality show The Ultimate Fighter, when the company was already losing millions, was a risky move that ultimately saved the UFC. The legendary final fight between Forrest Griffin and Stephan Bonnar became a turning point that opened MMA to a mass audience. Under White's leadership, the UFC went from a banned sport to a global phenomenon. The company overcame numerous obstacles: bans on television, resistance from the authorities, financial difficulties. Gradually, the UFC absorbed its main competitors, Pride, WEC, and Strikeforce, effectively monopolizing the MMA market. The conclusion of multi-million-dollar contracts with Fox and then with ESPN, expansion in international markets, setting new PPV sales records. All this testified to the incredible success of the organization. Even during the pandemic, when most sporting events were canceled, the UFC found a way to continue holding tournaments by creating Fight Island in Abu Dhabi. However, behind this success lies a dark side. Accusations of monopoly and low payouts to fighters cast a shadow on the organization's reputation. White's personal scandals, especially the incident with his wife, show how power and success can negatively affect a person's character. Dana's mother's words that her son turned into a vindictive tyrant are particularly telling. They emphasize how far White has come from his roots, from the boy from a dysfunctional family who once dreamed of a better fate. Power and money seem to have changed his personality, and not always for the better. The history of the UFC under White's leadership demonstrates that success in business does not always correlate with personal growth. One can achieve incredible heights professionally, but lose touch with reality and one's moral principles. This story also reminds us that behind every great success lie not only ambition and hard work, but also compromises that a person makes with their own conscience. The path from a simple bellman to a billionaire often requires sacrifices, and not always material ones. However, one cannot deny Dana White's huge influence on the development of mixed martial arts. Thanks to his vision and perseverance, MMA has gone from a marginal spectacle to one of the most popular sports in the world. Under his leadership, the UFC has created thousands of jobs, opened the path to success for hundreds of talented fighters, and brought joy to millions of fans around the world. Dana White's story is a complex interweaving of triumph and tragedy, success and downfall. It reminds us that true success is measured not only by the figures in a bank account or the scale of influence, but also by the ability to remain true to one's principles and not lose humanity on the way to the top. This is a story about how even the most successful people are not immune to mistakes, and that true strength of character is manifested not in achieving success, but in how a person manages that success. If you enjoyed this fascinating success story and want to learn more interesting facts from the world of sports and business, be sure to subscribe to the Detective Brooks channel. There you will find even more unique investigations and exciting stories.